This video is for Greek class, and this is for Croy, chapter 19. It goes along with your textbook. You might want to grab your textbook and follow along with me while I explain this. Chapter 19 is building on chapter 18. If you learned about present participles, now I'm going to tell you about aorist active and aorist middle participles. And the good thing about them is that they are, at least in the first aorist, recognizable by that saw infix that we're already used to, and other than that, they basically are following the present tense forms that you saw in chapter 18. So you get the nominative and the genitive to help you out, and once you've got that, you should be able to form the rest. So lusas and lusantas becomes lusanti, lusanta, lusantes, lusantone, lusasin, lusantas, right? Same thing for the feminine, lusasa, lusases, helps you know what to do. The rest of it you should be able to follow along with, because it follows the first declension nouns in the mixed form. The neuter, lusan, lusantas, again, you know what to do with it. It follows the neuter forms that we have seen all the way back to the second declension, like way back toward the beginning of our textbook. These are them in their regular form, and these are the active ones, aorist, so that means we're in the past tense. I'll talk about what that means in just a moment. The aorist middle participles here are just the nominatives and the genitives. They have that men in them that helps you know that you're in the middle or the passive. They have the sa to let you know that you're in the aorist, but there is no epsilon at the beginning because that only happens in the indicative. So lusa menos, lusa menu, lusa mene, lusa menes, lusa menon, lusa menu. You'd know how to make the rest of the chart because you understand the other things that we've looked at so far. Just like all other aorists, not only are there first aorists, which are regular, but there are second aorists that are unusual. And so the second aorists are built on those radical stem changes that we learned in chapter 14. Chapter 14 is incredibly important. Star it, put a tab there if you need to go back and look at some of those words there. There's no saw, there's only a radical stem change, and so you just have to know these ones. Here's one that we've learned. We learned adon, which means I saw. But without the epsilon at the beginning, it becomes id. So this is from Horao. So idon, idontas, idusa, iduses, idon, idontes. The radical stem change is different, but then it follows the exact same format, and so the endings are not unusual. You just have to be able to recognize the stem change itself to know what verb you are working with here. Here's another one. This one you might be able to recognize a little more easily because it's closer to it, but ginomai in the aorist is genomein, but you drop off that epsilon, and so now you have gen, genomenos, genomenu, genomene, genomenes, genomenon, genomenu. It's a radical stem change, but once you know your vocab from chapter 14, you should be good to go. So let me really encourage you to focus on the chapter 14 radical stem change ones, because those are the most common ones, and the other ones after that we'll be able to learn over time, or we'll pick them up as we keep studying or as you keep reading. Okay, that is the form of them. Now let's talk about how do we translate these. Aorist participles do a number of different things, and they often express action that's prior to the indicative, the main verb. And so we often use the phrase after. So after this has happened, then the main verb happens. So after believing, after she believed, then she went out. For tonight's homework, let's go ahead and do that. So just like for chapter 18, you did while, for chapter 19, use after. And even if it's a little awkward, that's going to help you out. We can talk about what all to do with it because these kinds of participles are going to follow all the other rules that we've seen so far. And so you can have adjective ones, just like you had adjective ones for the present. So you could have the woman who was believing. You can have substantive ones, so the things that were. You can have ones that are adverbial, and this is especially dealing with the adverbial. And the adverbial ones go after, do the participle, and then do your main verb. And so that's what we're going to do for now. That simplifies this chapter quite a bit. There's a lot more options in the chapter. We can talk through some of those, but I think you'd learn them best by just trying them out. One other thing in this chapter, though, is genitive absolutes, which are a totally different thing from what I've been talking about before. It's confusing, though, because they use a participle form to make them work, but they are their own idea. Genitive absolutes are a special construction in Greek. They are independent of the rest of the sentence. They are, in the genitive case, and they address something different from the main verb. And they are often at the beginning of a sentence, but they don't have to always be there. But oftentimes, because they're separate from the rest of the sentence, they show up there. So let me show you some examples of these. These are not as common as just participles, but they are a subpart of participles, and they happen enough that it's worth your while to recognize them. Here's an example of it. Leguses, tes, gunakas, ta remata, tauta, ekroxen, ta teknon. And so in this case, you have this phrase at the beginning that actually doesn't have to do with the main part of the sentence. The main part of the sentence is the child cried out. But the beginning part of the sentence is, while the woman was speaking these words. We're going to go ahead and use the while because it's in the present tense, but the whole thing is in the genitive because it's about somebody else, something else, and yet they are happening at the same time. And so in Greek, they put these things together so you know that they're happening at the same time. The woman is speaking these words, the child cried out. Here's another one. Kathisantas, tu, arkantas, epiton, thronon, hoi douloi, enegka, arton, kai, oinon. Okay, the main part of the sentence is the servants brought, or the slaves brought the bread and wine. But this other part of the sentence is in the genitive. And because the whole thing is in the genitive, like, which one was it that was sitting down? It was the ruler who was sitting down on his throne. That whole thing is the genitive absolute. It's not necessarily related to the slaves. And so we put that in the genitive in Greek to know that they are actually two different parts of the sentence, and yet they go together this way. One more example of it is this. The demons fled. That's the main part of your sentence. And then eis elphantos, that's in your genitive, to kuriou. It's also in the genitive. And the genitive thing is the subject of it. So the Lord entered the house, and the demons fled. Or after the Lord entered the house, the demons fled. We'll have to play around with the timing of it, but these phrases that occur all in the genitive at the beginning of the sentence, we call them genitive absolutes, and they have a different subject than the main part of the sentence. The subject is always in the genitive. And so I wanted to make you aware of it because they are not the most common thing, but they do happen enough that it's worth your while to pay attention to it. So the two things in this chapter are aorist participles, most important, and then secondly, genitive absolutes. And genitive absolutes can happen in present participles, aorist participles, any kind of participles. We can answer questions about these as you have them. If you want to send me an email with them, that's great. Or if you want to talk about it when we get to class, that's great. But this chapter just mostly takes things that you already have and puts them into play in different ways. So you can do this. Feel free to watch this video again if that would be helpful. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you in class.